So tell me a little bit about yourself and who you are.
My name is Reddit Hudson. I'm the Program Associate for the American Civil Liberties Union of Eastern Missouri. I'm a former police officer. Here in St. Louis, I was a police officer for 5 years. I resigned that position though. I was in good standing, but I resigned because I was so disillusioned with our criminal justice system in general and the conduct of some of my peers in particular. While most officers are good people trying to do a difficult job, the number of officers who abuse that authority, and we've seen it more and more, I think mainstream America in particular, with the onset of video cameras, has become more keenly aware of the kinds of problems that we've seen all along in poor communities and minority communities with abused police authority. So having left that work, I ultimately wound up here at the ACLU, where I'm given opportunities to address issues like that in the criminal justice process.
And the reason why we are doing this interview, one of the issues that is dear to your heart, you issued a report this month called Suffering in Silence, Human Rights Abuses in St. Louis Correctional Centers. Tell me a little bit about that report and what you found.
Well, it is a preliminary investigation in the form of a report that we've issued. It was an investigation that was initiated about 18 months ago as a result of several independent complaints and contacts that we had at the ACLU of Eastern Missouri about abuses going on inside our corrections facilities, the City Justice Center, the Medium Security Institute, just numerous complaints of what we thought to be horrific descriptions of abuses. Prisoners being beaten without mercy and without provocation. No recourse for them in the aftermath of situations like that. There was nowhere for them to turn. The complaint process really made unavailable to them. Early on, we were contacted by a number of COs, corrections officers, who then began providing us with information independently of the inmates who provided information, and it was all very consistent, remarkably consistent accounts of the same kinds of violations and abuses. The COs talked about inmates being floors in the cold while COs had on something to cover themselves up. Some COs ordering assaults of inmates by other inmates and rewarding them for that. Really serious allegations of abuse, some of which, or many of which, resulted in injuries to inmates requiring medical treatment, and in some cases neglect that looks like it resulted in the deaths of some inmates, and all of that is covered in this report. There was allegations of medical neglect and abuse. Inmates made to lie in their own urine and feces because they were unable to take themselves to the restroom. People denied medication, even heart patients, inmates that had heart conditions, because they couldn't physically take themselves to the point where the medicine was going to be provided to them, where the medical person was walking down the corridor and you were supposed to be at the door of your unit to receive your medicine. If you couldn't get yourself up, they would get to the door and tell you, well, you don't get your medicine today because you couldn't make it. Those kinds of allegations prompted us to look into it, along with the knowledge that given the structures in our criminal justice systems, in our prisons, not just in St. Louis, but across the country, there would be no valuing of these people's rights under the circumstances, and there would be no resource for them to be given enough voice and power to stand up for their own rights. So we took it upon ourselves to look into this further to see if further action would be warranted.
And just to clarify, how did the ACLU come to hear about what you guys call in the report endemic abuse and policy violations going on in the Justice Center? And as well as how many COs and inmates did you talk to?
It was the same sources who initially contacted us. Once we made contact or returned to dialogues with them, the picture became more clear for us, especially given the consistency of the information we got from the COs and the information we got from the inmates. What was the rest of that question?
How many COs
how
and
many
inmates
COs?
have you talked to?
I think there are a total of 6 COs, and now we're up to, I think, 8 inmates, because even as the report was being compiled, we would always get another call or another piece of information. So it really is a preliminary investigation. I believe that an entity that is ready to investigate more fully, for example, the U.S. Justice Department, whom we've forwarded a copy of this report, if they were to walk in to either one of these facilities or both and begin to ask questions and give immunities to people who had answers to those questions, like corrections officers that wanted to cooperate, or inmates that needed to be protected from the kinds of retaliation that is described in this report. This report represents the tip of the iceberg. It really is probably a significantly lesser part of the whole of the violations and abuses that are taking place in that system, and that's something we hope to see, because it's important to remember that this information was provided to us by these people in an environment, as is described in this report, that is absolutely characterized by intimidation and retaliation. Whether you're a CO or an inmate, if you try to stand up for the rights of an inmate, if you try to insist on adherence to policy, particularly use of force policy inside these facilities, there are consequences. And I think it's important to note at this point, while I'm thinking about it, you all know that a press release went out last week, which would have been the week of the 16th, March 16th, 2009, announcing a press conference to be held on March 18th, 2009. And at that press conference, we were going to have 3 of the corrections officers that provided information for us at the conference. Well, at the very last minute, they pulled out. And we understood it, I understood it, particularly in light of what is in this report. The environment that they exist in is such that it only made sense. I thought, wow, they pulled out, and that is part of the continuing story that this report tells. I thank them, though, for what they did do for us, which was really give us a look, first-hand eyewitness into what goes on in these facilities, and they've done us a tremendous service in doing that. And I think that the opportunity for them to go forward publicly is still there. I think that at some point in the future they may do that, and I think what they're going to find is that even though there are forces that would line up against them, there are many more resources available to them that would line up with them. Human rights is a priority right now. I think the President himself has made the issue of human rights in our corrections facilities a priority. It is on the table, and I think that this report and the efforts of these corrections officers and inmates is moving us in the right direction to becoming a place, a nation where our actions and our record becomes more consistent with our stated ideals, and we don't stand as such hypocrites so often when it comes to us pointing the finger, for example, at other nations as human rights violators. Look at the conditions in your prisons. Look at how you've treated these people, when at the same time, right here at home, whether you're in St. Louis or anywhere else in the country, we know that these conditions exist in our prisons. And yet we've done nothing about it. We've failed to acknowledge it, and we've often attacked those who name this corruption, but it's very real. And we all have a collective responsibility to make sure that we are the nation that we say we are.
Mm-hmm.